Hello and welcome to the Operators Association podcast. This is Greg, your athletic director, and today is part 6 of the Hero's Journey podcast series. Last week we finished up with SQT, finishing up around SQT graduation. Today I want to talk about checking into a team, and more so I just want to give you an overview, a macro overview of what the team cycle is like, what you actually do when you get to a SEAL team. It's kind of amazing to me looking back that before joining the Navy, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL for years, and I planned all this out. But I had no idea what SEALs actually did once you got to a team, which is the actual job of a Navy SEAL, right? Going through training is not your initial job. And all of the focus prior to joining the Navy is just on the training pipeline, right? Primarily BUDS. You really don't even know anything about SQT. And that makes sense, right? In a sense, that's how it should be, because that is the elephant in the room, so to speak. BUDS is your Mount Everest, and that's what you need to prepare for. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt. You guys are part of this Operators Association community, which is awesome that you have this wealth of knowledge. If you want to be a Navy SEAL, you want to be a Green Beret, you want to be in MARSOC, you want to be a Raider, it's good to have an idea of what the actual members are doing once they get to their team. So I'll at least give you a 30,000-foot snapshot, a little overview of what the team's cycle and schedules are like, and then you can forget all about it and go back to focusing on boats and logs. But who knows, maybe one day, 3 years from now, you'll be in SQT and look back on this and it'll spark some vague memory in your little brain. So even before checking into the team, I'll rewind back to SQT. At some point during SQT, the instructor staff are going to ask you for your recommendations on where you want to go after graduation. For the huge majority of people, that means East Coast or West Coast. Now, some guys may go to SDV, SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team. There were 2 guys from my class who went straight to SDV. But for most people, East or West. So if you want to go to the East Coast, you will 100% get the East Coast, because San Diego is in slightly higher demand than Virginia Beach. So if you want to stay on the West Coast in California, there's a pretty good chance you'll get it, but you may not. There are some guys that will put in for California and then will have to go to the East Coast. I would imagine that may be even more so right now because of the new team compound in Imperial Beach that was just built. I told some of you guys I was just out there 2 weeks ago for work with the Navy for a week, and the new compound in Imperial Beach is really next level. It is incredible. It's really what you would expect. You hear a lot about the myth of Navy SEALs, kind of what a civilian who knows nothing about the military expects Navy SEALs to do, and you hear all sorts of ridiculous things. This compound is really what that person would expect that the Navy SEALs train at and work at. It's truly a world-class elite fighting force facility. It's very impressive. Everything there is 100% new construction. All the team buildings are lined up one by one on the beach. The workout facilities are incredible. They have a huge outdoor pool with an obstacle course over it, rock climbing wall alongside it. The whole thing is 20 feet deep, huge trident at the bottom of the pool. It is really professional grade. I wanted to come to the East Coast. I'm an East Coast guy. All my friends, family are out here. If I was an SQT right now and I saw those facilities, I'm not sure, but it would make me think twice about it. Right? It would definitely make me consider staying in San Diego because it's that nice. So back to choosing a coast, that may make San Diego even more competitive than in the past right now. Now, it may not, because if you're in SQT, if you're in BUDS, and you see that compound in Imperial Beach, which, number one, I'll say most BUDS or SQT students probably aren't going to see that compound anyway, because I'm sure they're probably afraid to go on it. Number two, if you do see that as a BUDS or SQT student, you might just assume that Virginia Beach has the same compound and put in East Coast anyway, and then be disappointed when you get out here, because it does not. Now, not to say we have shit facilities. The facilities out here are awesome. They're great. But that new facility in San Diego is truly next level and very impressive. So after a couple weeks, you'll hear your results back, which coast you're going to. Graduate SQT, and you head out to your team. When I graduated, they were sending recent graduates to teams that were either on deployment at the time or had just gotten back from deployment. Currently, I know they're fairly backed up, so they're actually sending new guys to teams that are about to deploy. So guys will check into their team a month or two before their team's about to deploy. The team goes on deployment without them. So the new guys are basically all at the command for them by themselves for 6 months. So I believe they're just now starting to formulate formalized curriculum, a training curriculum for the new guys while the team is deployed. So they're even more spun up by the time they start their first workup after the team gets back. So I'm going to go over just a macro overview of the deployment cycle. Deployment cycle in the SEAL teams or just a cycle or a pump, whatever, is 2 years. So that 2-year period is broken up into 4 different 6-month blocks. Those 4 blocks are ProDev, ULT, TJIT, and deployment. So ProDev is the first 6 months. ProDev means professional development. And as the name implies, professional development is your time as an individual to go to certain schools, to get qualifications so that you bring something to the table. You have a skill set that you bring to your platoon. So maybe during ProDev is when you would go to sniper school, to breacher school, if you're a medic, you'd go to a med refresher, dive supervisor, all of the necessary quals that you need to conduct training and to be an effective fighting force on deployment. Typically, you get those during ProDev. Now, if you're an officer, typically you're not going to go to many schools like that. You might go to some basic ones, but as an officer, oftentimes during ProDev, you'll do what's called an augment. And an augment is just a deployment, but you're augmenting another team that's deployed. So that's what I did immediately. I got to Team 10. I checked in. Team 10 had just gotten back from deployment, so Team 2 replaces them. Team 2 was on deployment. So I went to East Africa, augmented Team 2 for a couple months. The thought process there is you're not going to these hard schools as an officer, so they want you to get experience and understand how things work downrange. And if anyone's taking the officer route, or just if anyone finds himself on an augment deployment in general, and it could happen to enlisted guys also, these things can be absolutely awesome opportunities. Really, really great learning opportunities. Just bring your notebook and talk to anybody and everybody over there, because often you don't have... there might not be a lot expected of you work-wise since you're going and helping out. So just walk around the JOC and talk to everybody. Talk to the intel guys, talk to the ISR guys. Just understand what their role is and what they do, and it'll be hugely helpful when you go back to your team. So ProDev is the first 6 months. Then you roll into ULT. ULT stands for Unit Level Training. So after you go out in ProDev, get all your individual skills, you come together as a unit, as a platoon, and you go through your core training blocks. ULT is kind of the meat and potatoes of your workup cycle. ULT and deployment are the 2 busiest times of this whole 2-year cycle. You're going to be gone from home the majority of your time during ULT. So ULT will be many of the same blocks that you did in SQT. It will have some new blocks, but it'll be obviously more advanced training. And regardless, even if it was the exact same level of training in SQT, you have to learn to work as a unit, right? A lot of these skill sets that you're doing are unit specific in some sense. You're going to have standardized SOPs across platoons, across coasts, east and west coasts, right? And in some sense, you should be able to kind of plug and play. You should be able to drop any SEAL operator into another platoon, and they can, within the week be completely up to speed on all of that platoon's SOPs. But everybody's going to communicate slightly differently, and they'll have different tactical tendencies or things they like to do. So throughout your time in ULT, you're learning to work and fight effectively as a unit. You finish up ULT, you've done all your blocks, your land warfare, CQC, SAUC, which is Special Operations Urban Combat, your military free fall, dive, MAROPS, TGM, tactical ground mobility training, all of your different blocks. Then you'll roll into TGIT, which is Task Group Integration Training. And your task group is basically what they call your full deploying element that you're going to send down range. So you just did some training with your actual platoon, but when you go on deployment, it's not just going to be a group of 20 SEALs, right? You need a lot of support personnel in order to live and sustain operations in a foreign country. Those are going to be EOD techs, absolutely. They're going to be intel analysts. They're going to be supply people. They're going to be CBs in the case of the Navy. CBs are people that they're basically military construction workers. They're great with they'll build just about anything you could imagine out of plywood and 2x4s. You might have some admin personnel. So all of the people that are going to be supporting you and enable you to have a successful deployment in TGIT theoretically come together and you do large-scale full mission profile training. So in ULT, if you're doing CQC, you're just going to be in the house or at the range doing strict CQC runs. You're not going to be doing a full mission profile workup from receipt of an intel package, mission planning, insert, infill, actions on, exfil, extract, coordinating with assets, deconflicting with other units, any of that, right? None of that is involved with ULT. ULT is strictly the hard skill sets. So TGIT is the time to practice all of these bigger skill sets that are actually necessary for success on deployment. ULT is the fun stuff. ULT is sexy, right? It's just working the pure operator skill sets. But TGIT is absolutely necessary for getting the realistic reps you're going to need on deployment. TGIT and deployment especially is where officers will really make their money also, whereas ULT is more focused for enlisted shooters. So everybody comes together for TGIT. You might do one or two large-scale military joint exercises. If you hear the term joint in the military, it means working with multiple branches of the military. So if I'm in the Navy and I work with some Army guys, that's a joint exercise or a joint operation. So if you hear the acronym JSOTF, you probably heard a lot during Afghanistan and Iraq, right? JSOTF is Joint Special Operations Task Force. So if it was only Navy SEALs, maybe it would just be called the Special Operations Task Force. There's not many of those that exist. Most of them are going to be joint. If you hear the word combined in front of that, that means it's multinational. So you hear CJSOTF, Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force. That means it's multiple countries and multiple branches from the U.S. So you'll do some large-scale exercises. Could be all over the country. You'll work with different units. Might work with the 160th. 160th is the, let's see if I get this right, 160th SOAR, Special Operations Aviation Regiment. They are the helo pilots. Is an Army unit that flies helicopters for SOF. They're tremendous. So yeah, you do these big exercises. You're also doing a lot of getting ready for deployment. So you, at this point in time in the cycle, you're going to know where you're going to deploy to, and you're going to be in touch with your counterparts who are currently deployed there, getting the intel picture on the ground, seeing what they've been up to, and getting yourself prepared to have a successful deployment. For the leadership, that also means just a lot of administrative work, right? You might getting everybody government passports, getting everyone visas, making sure that you have all the equipment that you're going to need for the deployment. You'll probably do a PDSS. PDSS stands for Pre-Deployment Site Survey. So that means if I'm going on deployment, instead of just deploying our whole unit and showing up, and then once we get on the ground say, oh shit, we didn't realize this or that, we should have brought this gear with us, etc. So a PDSS is just sending a few guys out ahead of time to meet with your counterparts, check out the situation on the ground, and determine any last minute changes or things you need to bring with you on deployment to be successful before it's too late. And then, of course, the fourth and final 6-month block is your actual deployment. So you go wherever you're supposed to be doing, and hopefully you have some good work to do. Now, right now, with force optimization, there are some platoons at teams which are not deploying for presence, so to speak. So currently there are 2 platoons at each team that are not going to deploy for that 6-month duration. Rather, they're going to be deploy for purpose units, meaning they're going to remain CONUS, remain in the United States at the team, continue training, and they're going to prepare for special purpose strategic missions, essentially, that pop up. So whenever more complex strategic level operations are needed, these SEAL platoons will be in the reserve, ready to go, essentially, ready to carry out those complex missions. So now you understand the 4 large-scale phases of a cycle, right? 2-year cycle broken down into 4 6-month periods. Now, why is it broken into 4 6-month periods? On each coast, there are 4 SEAL teams, right? On the West Coast, you have the odd teams, 1, 3, 5, 7. On the East Coast, you have the even-numbered teams, 2, 4, 8, 10. So at any point in time, there's 1 team in each phase of the 2-year cycle. So there's always 1 team in ProDev, 1 team in ULT, 1 team in TJIT, and 1 team deployed. So that means there's a SEAL team deployed at all times. And as soon as your deployment, you come home, and the next team that was just in TJIT now deploys. That's the cycle. Every 2 years, rinse and repeat. And when you come back from deployment, you kind of rejock. There's a shuffling of personnel. After that 2-year period, some people leave the team, some new people come in, but many of the people stay the same. So there will absolutely be some continuity in your platoon, guys that stick around for a while, but every pump, every deployment, some guys will leave and some new guys will come in. If you're enlisted, you'll have the opportunity to stay at the team, to stay in your original platoon for much longer than if you're an officer. If you're an officer, it's very unlikely that you're going to do consecutive back-to-back platoons in a row. That used to be the norm during the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Right now, that's virtually unheard of. Very, very unlikely. Here's another good piece of general info for you. Within every SEAL team, there are 3 troops. These are very excitingly called 1 troop, 2 troop, and 3 troop. Then each troop is made up of 2 platoons. Now, this number seems to always be fluctuating. They just went back down to 2 platoons per troop. When I was at SEAL Team 10, it was 3 platoons per troop, depending on the leadership in charge of NSW and the military at large. This number kind of always changes depending on what current and future missions we're planning for. Anyway, right now we are going back to 2 platoons per troop. So 6 total platoons at a SEAL team. Now, your platoon is really the group of guys that you work with. That's your main unit. But what troop you're in is very significant because each troop is assigned a different geographic area to cover down on. Now, the West Coast covers CENTCOM and PACOM. That's Central Command and Pacific Command, so basically the Middle East and Asia. And that's only 2 different areas, so I'm not entirely sure what their current breakdown is of how many platoons get sent where. And the East Coast's areas of responsibility are AFRICOM, EUCOM, and SOUTHCOM. So Africa, Europe, South America. So in the past, if you were on the East Coast and you were in 1 troop, that meant you were going to Africa. If you were in 2 troop, you were going to Europe. If you were in 3 troop, you were going to South America. Now, that is always kind of fluctuating. Right now, we don't have a whole lot of engagements in South America. So 3 troop may be those 2 deployed for purpose platoons. Or maybe there's a ton of work to do in Africa, so 3 troop, which didn't have as much work in South America, sends one of their platoons to Africa as well to plus up 1 troop. These are not hard and fast laws, but in general, those are the areas that each troop covers down on. Now, of course, if we're actually at war during Iraq and Afghanistan, that's out the window for the most part. If there's serious work to be done like that, then everybody's going. Doesn't matter what troop you're in, you're going to Afghanistan, you're going to Iraq. if you're really needed. Now, even during the peak of Afghanistan and Iraq, not every deploying SEAL, not every deploying Green Beret was going to those wars. There are still engagements elsewhere that people need to cover down on. And oftentimes those guys were fairly bitter, right, if they have to go down to South America and do some training exercise with a country there while their buddies are going to Afghanistan at war. And this is not the time when I'm going to agree or disagree with that. Those decisions are made many, many levels above our heads. And somebody in Washington has deemed that they are important and worthy of being carried out, for strategic reasons that we don't fully understand on the ground. But that's when you just kind of put on your good soldier hat and march along, and then proceed to bitch and complain all deployment long, like every special operator is proficient at. So you understand SEAL team structure now. 3 troops at a team. Each troop is responsible for a different geographic deployment location. Each troop has 2 platoons in it. Now, not only do you deploy to the same geographic location as the rest of the people in your troop, throughout the 18-month workup cycle prior to that 6-month deployment, you're going to be traveling around training with your troop. Now, don't get me wrong, your platoon is your local unit of action, right? That is your family. That is the people that you work with day in and day out. If you're doing house runs in CQC, if you're doing land warfare runs, you're going to be doing 95% of those as a platoon. You can do some troop-sized hits if it was a really large target, but for the most part, you're just going to be working with the guys in your platoon. However, you will travel and conduct all training events at the same time with your troop. So what I mean by that is if we're going, again, as CQC for an example, if I'm going to do CQC out at Fort Knox, all of one troop is going to travel to Fort Knox together. We're going to stay in the same hotel. We're going to be on the same schedule. I'm actually going to do my CQC runs with my platoon, and I still work within my platoon when we're there. But we're going to be on the same macro schedule, right? We're going to be on the road together throughout ULT. When we go dive, all of one troop is going to Key West to dive. So anyone that's in the same troop as you, you'll be spending a decent amount of time with. Now, if guys are just at your SEAL team but in a different troop, there's a possibility you might never even meet that person. Because your troops are on different schedules, you're deploying to different locations, you're never going to work together. The name SEAL team is kind of misleading. I think because of the word team, when most civilians hear the word SEAL team, they think of a platoon, right? A platoon is really your team. A platoon is used to be about 16 guys. I think it's larger now because they've reduced the number of platoons down to 2 per troop. It's probably upwards of 20 guys, maybe 24 guys in a platoon. That's your team. That's that central family unit you're constantly working with. And the actual SEAL team is your overarching command, right? It's more administrative than anything else. Like I said, each troop deploys to a different location. So a SEAL team does not operate together. A SEAL team is literally split across different continents on deployment. And a final note on the SEAL team structure, platoons are named by the phonetic alphabet. So in one troop, you have Alpha and Bravo platoons. In 2 troop, you'd have Charlie and Delta. And in 3 troop, you'd have, Echo and Fox, or Foxtrot. So immediately, if I was an East Coast guy and you hear that somebody's in Alpha platoon, regardless of what team they are, that means they're in one troop, they deploy to Africa. So that's the 2-year cycle and the actual structure of a SEAL team. So hopefully you guys understand how things work now. A brief skeleton version of what to expect when you get to a team and what the actual annual requirements of the job are. As far as the new guy experience itself, my advice would just be helpful, be humble, be yourself, and be a sponge. So a lot of these are pretty self-evident, right? Be helpful. Look to help out in any way you can. As a new guy, you're going to be the first ones to the team, probably the last ones to leave. You say yes to everything, volunteer for everything. You just got to be eager to jump on any possible opportunities to learn and be involved. Be humble is pretty straightforward. I don't think most people have any problem with this. Being a new guy to SEAL team, if you do, it will get corrected very quickly. Now, kind of the flip side to be humble is be yourself. And what I mean by that is sometimes being a new guy sucks. Shit, a lot of the time being a new guy sucks. But don't ever lose your self-respect. Don't ever lose your confidence in yourself. Don't ever compromise your values. Be that humble, respectful new guy, but also know where the line is and don't take any shit if you feel like somebody's legitimately disrespecting you. And the last thing, be a sponge. Man, I can't emphasize that enough. Your job as a new guy is just to soak up everything, right? Ask questions to everybody. Ironically, a lot of new guys don't like to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid. They want to seem like they know everything. By nature of being a new guy, you don't know anything. So humble yourself and just ask questions constantly. Bring your little notepad everywhere you go and have conversations with all people of the team, right? If you can have conversations with older guys or operators, that's great. If you can have conversations with guys in the ops department, that's great. Have conversations with the GMs, the admin people, whoever. Just understand more about how the Navy works, how the team works, and how you can actually be useful and become an asset. When guys are going to conduct training, maybe they're doing Hurst cast, which is helicopter rope suspension techniques, like rappelling or fast roping out of helos. Go into the low bays with the guys, get the fast ropes out, see what maintenance you need to do. When the breachers are doing things, go with them, see how to work the chainsaw, see how to use a hoolie. If the JTACs are going to the simulator, go with them. Even if you can't get reps yourself, just go and watch and see what they do. One thing I can't stress enough is there are so many different skill sets within NSW. There is absolutely never a time that you don't have 10 different things you could be improving at. It's often said we're a jack of all trades, master of none, and that's the truth, right? Because we have to do everything, and you can't be a master of everything, but you have to be as good as you possibly can be, right? That's why we train all the time. It's funny, some people, some outsiders, some civilians that don't know anything about how Navy SEALs work other than a 20 minutes of a documentary they saw on TV once, oftentimes they're very confused when you've graduated SQT, they ask what you're doing, and you tell them training. I've had this happen multiple times. When people look at you confused and say, I thought you finished training. Because they probably don't even know about SQT, but they think that you graduated BUDS, so you are now a Navy SEAL and you are good to go. I don't know what kind of extraordinary PR work has been done by the military to get people to believe that you can go to a 6-month school with zero background and come out as an absolute lethal ninja. But that's what a lot of people think. The reality is, like anything in life, it takes time to get good at something. It takes a long time to master something. And like I said, it's not like we have one skill to work on. If all we did was military free fall, if all we did was jump out of planes, we could be absolute masters of it. If all we did was shoot guns at paper targets, we could be masters of it. If all we did was scuba dive, we could be pretty damn good at it. But that is not the case. We have to be able to do everything. So when a new student graduates from BUDS or graduates from SQT, yes, you do have the fundamentals, but overall, you really don't know shit. Even after your first 2-year workup and deployment cycle, you don't know very much. After 2 full deployment cycles, you're just starting to know enough to be dangerous. And you cannot train enough. You will train and train and train your entire career because there are always things to get better at. So I'm going to leave you with that. I know this wasn't the most exciting podcast, no wild stories thrown in there, but I didn't understand anything about how an actual SEAL team functioned or how it was structured, how it deployed. So I don't know, I feel like that's important, and it's something you guys should have at least a macro level knowledge of and know what you're getting yourself into. So this is the end of the 6-part podcast series, but certainly not the end of podcasts. So going forward, if there's anything that you guys would really like to hear about, whether it's in the teams specifically, whether it's in training, whether it's physically training for selection, let me know. You can either post your request to Discord and you guys can upvote them, or you can shoot me an email at greg@operatorsassociation.com. I look forward to using these future podcasts as opportunities to deep dive some of the topics that you guys are interested in and want to hear more about. Thanks for listening. Keep learning, keep training. See ya.